Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good and the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and this week I have the distinct honor and privilege of being joined by America's favorite rocket scientist, Bob Luzenski. Bob joined us a couple weeks ago to talk about time zones, and he is back with more Bufnagle goodness. Bob, how are you tonight?
I am fantastic. As always, Rafe, whenever I have the opportunity to record an episode here at the Bufnagle the podcast.
Well, I tell you, it is, like I said, is it a great day to be doing a podcast with you. And before we get going, I want to thank all our listeners for being here and being part of our little Bufnagle world. Thanks to you, we are a global top 10% podcast. We can be reached at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Hey, if you are new to the podcast, welcome. Thank you for coming. We are glad that you are here. Please give us 4 or 44 or 74, or I don't know, some big number of episodes and see if we don't give you something to bring you back. So we're talking about lots of different things, and surely something will resonate with you. Remember,
tell me Shirley.
Yeah, I remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. Subscribe. There's a subscribe button somewhere on your podcast machine. Please press that button and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out because it gives me pudding and Zach gets brownies.
Actually, we found out some interesting things about pudding over the Thanksgiving holiday.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. I learned some things. I found an old recipe that I need to try again. I've used once.
Well, and I was with Zach last weekend making. I didn't make them. Zach made Thanksgiving brownies as well. So
nice.
Those are good things to have. Before we get onto today's topic, which is I'm just shooting right to it. It's today's topic: big rockets. Shoot the rockets, as they said in one of those incredible movies. We're going to talk. We each have one little thing we wanted to say about time zones last time we were together.
Yes.
And okay. Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
No, you go first. I go ahead.
Okay. My thing was this: is I get questions when I explain all this stuff, and people say, "Well, why don't we just have one time? Like we could all use the same time, and then it would be okay." And the answer is, yeah, that's what we do. That's exactly what we do.
Yes,
we have that. It's called UTC. It is a time. There it is. It's the time. It's the time pretty much at the prime meridian. And that's what UTC is. And everything else, all the other time zones are just derivatives of that.
They're offsets, yes. For example, Eastern Standard Time is 5 hours off of UTC.
UTC. So we're already doing that. So we have achieved your goal, everybody. There is one clock. There is one time. It's either on or it's not on. I mean, you're either synchronized or you're not. That's it. And you can offset one way or the other. And most of those offsets, Bob, are an hour. But,
and this brings me to my topic. Growing up as I did in the Detroit area, we were blessed to have not just 3 television broadcast channels, CBS, NBC, and ABC on channels 2, 4, and 7. We also had Channel 9, and Channel 9 was Canadian Broadcasting channel. And the thing that I'm amazed I didn't remember to talk about last time was the fact that when they would announce the times of their television shows, Canada, like when the hockey game was going to start, when the Maple Leafs were going to play or the Canadians, they would say the times like you would hear for a show here in the U.S., but then they would say, and 7:30 in Newfoundland. And the reason after we recorded the previous episode, I was surprised that I didn't think of that while we were recording, is because that's the solution to the problem we were talking about for Michigan and Indiana.
go to a half hour.
We need a half-hour time zone. Simple as that. I think Michigan, the states of Michigan and Indiana, should get together and decide that there should be a time halfway between Eastern time and Central time, and we should just give it a name. I'm not sure what.
It'd be
Michiana time,
Michiana time, or Indigan time, or something, or
whatever. Yeah.
And then if you are like in one of those Canadian ones that's up right above there, what's north of Toronto, of Michigan? Is Ontario still up there?
It's still Ontario, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So they could join. Part of that would, and of course Quebec would do whatever they want to do, right? Because that's how they do that.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. All right. So, all right. Hey, I told you, Bob. I told you we would get this done in a very finite period of time, and we would get back to big rockets.
Look at that. Yeah, you did.
And here we are.
Right. Yeah, so, it was less than 5 minutes.
So big rockets, okay? And the reason we talk about big rockets with America's favorite rocket scientists is that's what he knows, but there's a lot of stuff going on now. We've talked before about SpaceX, but the big thing in the news these days is Artemis, okay? Now, I looked this up because I wondered, Artemis is the name of a Greek god.
Oh, see, I'm so glad you did this, because
okay.
I intended to do this.
All right, and I didn't know this, and I was like, oh, she's the goddess of wild animals, the hunt, and vegetation, and of chastity and childbirth. Okay, and so then I read she's the daughter of.
Go together?
Well, yes. You they can be. Yes, they can go together. They can go together, or they could be distinct. They could be all right. So, but she is the daughter of Zeus and Leto, and the twin sister of guess who?
Apollo, of course. That much I knew.
Okay, so there you go.
But then I'm from the Apollo generation, so of course I would know that.
Well, there you go. So, all right, Apollo went to the moon.
1969 to 1972. It was an amazing time. You know, I was a young boy growing up, very impressionable, and that was what impressed me the most was watching those lunar landings, watching the astronauts land on the moon, walk on the moon. It was an amazing time. It really was.
And then, so after Skylab and shuttles and all sorts of things,
30 plus years of shuttle.
Yeah, and 50 years later, we're going. They, us, somebody. Whatever pronoun you want to use there, the humanity is going back to the moon, and the first test run of that is Artemis 1, and that's in flight as we record.
Yes, in fact, this afternoon, earlier this evening before dinner, there was the Orion spacecraft, which was in orbit around the moon, what's called a distant retrograde orbit. It's been in that orbit for the past 6 days. It hasn't even made one full revolution because it takes a lot longer than that to get all the way around in that particular orbit.
Okay, so sorry, I just got it. Okay, so Orion is the spacecraft for the Artemis 1 mission.
Yes,
that got pushed. I guess launched toward the moon by a big rocket.
Yes, a big rocket called the Space Launch System, or SLS.
Really, they just called it.
It really deserves a better name than that. I agree. But
what Bodie McBoatface was taking, like anything.
It is. Okay. It is astounding that that the SLS has flown its first flight and still doesn't have a proper name, like, say, Saturn, like the Saturn V. You know, I mean, the Saturn V was the definitive rocket of the Apollo period. It's what got us to the moon, and it had a proper name. And the SLS does not have a proper name.
Okay, so sadly. SLS stands for, you said?
Space Launch System, which is utterly generic.
All right, so there's a Space Launch System rocket, which you stick Orion on top of it.
Orion is the spacecraft. Yep.
And you fire it up, and it goes. The rocket goes up, releases Orion. Orion keeps going to the moon in some capacity. What happens to SLS? Come back down?
Nope. It's just all actually expendable in what is a shocking thought nowadays. As we talked earlier, previously, I think earlier this year, when we talked about SpaceX and the Falcon 9, and the fact that SpaceX has made reusing their first stage boosters on the Falcon 9 rocket, they've made that normal. That is the norm now. And unfortunately, the SLS was designed the design was started at a time when that wasn't the norm. And so here we are. And in addition, I mean, the SLS there were a couple things. The biggest driver behind SLS was that it was supposed to reuse shuttle hardware or shuttle derived hardware, and that was part of what was dictated by the congressional action that caused the SLS to come to be. But before we get deep into SLS, we should talk a little bit more about Artemis 1 and what's going on right now. So Artemis 1 is in lunar orbit at this time. Earlier this evening, there was a orbit change maneuver that was performed to set up Artemis 1 for leaving lunar orbit and heading back towards the Earth.
So you said that it's been in lunar orbit for 6 days.
Yes. I believe it was in, give or take, it was in the distant retrograde lunar orbit for about.
It depends on how you define lunar orbit, right? I mean, because whenever you're in that gravity well, if you're in the well,
you're in some kind of orbit around the moon.
Right.
It's been longer than that it was in the moon's gravitational sphere of influence. But
yeah, so it's taken. So it must be really far out relative to what we used to do with didn't.
Yes, Apollo was very different, and there's reasons for that. Apollo orbited the moon at 60 nautical miles, so it was quite close, and it orbited the moon every 2 hours, whereas this distant retrograde orbit that Artemis 1, that the Orion spacecraft is in.
Wait! We're going to leave it as an exercise to the listener, based upon the information you've given. All right, and F equals ma. Just figure out what
just figure it out.
Just figure out what that
orbital mechanics.
What does that altitude have to be so that you will be, instead of 2 hours, you're at 6 days. So so you
and
can.
That isn't a full orbit. They didn't do a full orbit. They only did like a quarter of it or a half of an orbit.
Oh, really? Right. Okay. Yeah, so how high up are they?
Quite a bit higher. That they actually. NASA made a big deal about the fact that the Orion spacecraft flew farther from Earth than any previous human spacecraft. And that previous high point was the Apollo 13 crew. When they did not go into lunar orbit, they went back on they were on a free return trajectory, and they went quite a ways beyond the moon, around the moon once, and then headed back to Earth. And so Artemis 1, the Orion spacecraft on Artemis 1, has gone farther than that by, and I don't remember the exact numbers. Again, that's an exercise for the listener. They can look it up. But it's something on the order of 260,000 miles away from Earth, and the moon is nominally 230 to 240,000 miles away. So you get an idea of the scale of it.
That's
quite a ways away. Yeah. Okay. So whereas 60 nautical miles, is pretty tight around the moon.
We fly airplanes at what, 6-7 miles altitude, right? That's where we are when you're flying in an airplane, and 60 nautical miles is what, 5,000 feet, give or take, for a mile. And you got 60 times 5,000 is
300,000 feet.
300,000 feet. So it's all right. That's a lot closer than 30,000 miles.
There's a couple of reasons to use this new distant retrograde orbit. One of them is that the moon is very lumpy. Okay. So the maintaining a low orbit like the Apollos did requires a lot of effort, and the intent behind how they're planning to do I believe that at some point they want to be able to land on the moon with the entire crew and just leave the Orion spacecraft, which is their trip home, in this higher orbit on its own. So you want it to be in a fairly stable orbit so that it doesn't require a lot of effort.
So what is it? So effort would be monitoring the altitude,
maintaining the orbit by making thruster firings and
really. And well, we have computers now, right? Really great computers, right?
So Artemis, this Artemis 1 mission is basically to test out the Orion spacecraft, to put it through its paces, and get prepared for the next mission, which is basically a similar flight, but with crew.
With people, right. So I was going to mention this. There's no people on this current spacecraft.
Correct. They've got a mannequin that they're using to detect, vibration and environment, to give them an idea of what the crew is going to experience. They have one crew seat that this mannequin is sitting in. So it'll give them a full, idea of what the crew would experience.
If they sat in the same seat
which someone will on the next flight.
All right. So they're ready to go and that one's going to go. Is it going to go around or around and land, or?
Artemis 2 is planned to go around, and Artemis 3 is, Artemis 2 is planned to be a similar flight to Artemis 1, but Artemis 3 is the planned landing. And I think we should get to that, but we should go to that by way of talking about the big rockets.
More big rockets, yes.
So, okay. Yes, we did intend to talk mostly about big rockets. And so Artemis 1, this flight was the first flight of the SLS, which we had mentioned. And the SLS is it's loved and hated in the space community, the space fan community. It looks a lot like parts of the shuttle, only more bigger. And without the shuttle orbiter, the engines from the shuttle orbiter were taken from the shuttle orbiter and actually put on the bottom of the what was the external tank is now the core stage.
So, but is there? I mean, so I can understand. I guess I can understand the love-hate there, right? The love is like, we've got it. It seems to work. Why mess with a good thing? The hate is like, couldn't we do something cooler or better or even
or newer
more
or cheaper? The challenges there are it's very expensive. It's a very expensive rocket to build and fly. It was very expensive to develop when it was sold as a as the expedient way to get to having a big rocket capability, so we could leave Earth orbit and send people beyond Earth orbit. It turned out to be more complicated than anybody had anticipated. Well, not anybody. There were some people that anticipated it would be that complicated.
All right. So I want to make a big rocket. Okay. There are some general procedures for doing this. You take a fuel and you mix it with oxygen as it's coming out of the nozzle. You light it on fire and it goes, right? But
you need an engine. You need engines. You need something to burn the fuel and the oxidizer to give you that propulsive effort to lift you off the ground. And so there are different choices of propellant. There are solid propellants. There's liquid propellants. The Saturn V, as a contrast on Apollo, the first stage of the Saturn V used kerosene, RP1, and liquid oxygen. And the 5 big engines on the Saturn V burned that and generated 7.5 million pounds of thrust to lift that big rocket off the ground and get it moving, so that then the second and third stage could use a more efficient fuel, hydrogen, with more efficient engines to do the rest of the lifting.
Okay, so when I had my little model rockets back in the day,
yes,
all right, we would build this model rocket, which is essentially a cardboard tube with a nose cone, some little fins on the side to keep.
Yeah, don't forget the fins.
Yep. All right, so I do that, and then I would put a Well, it depends. Some people called them rocket engines, and some people called them rocket motors. And I'm not sure that there's a real big difference, but regardless,
It's a fine point.
all right. But it was a little cardboard tube. I don't know, this big, 2.5.
It was a thick cardboard tube.
It was a thick, well, but the tube itself could be like, it was the size of my thumb.
Yeah, it was about 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah,
I think,
and it was a thick walled cardboard tube.
Yes.
And in it had some propellant and some
solid
a
propellant.
sequence of combustible materials.
Yep.
From the bottom to the top. But at the bottom, where the gases come out, was like, I'll say there was a nozzle. It was
a nozzle.
It was like a ceramic piece of, I don't know what it was. It was a thing, and it was narrower there, and it had some kind of probably some math shape that was closely
There was an
approximated.
expansion. Yeah, there was an expansion shape there.
Okay, so that's a rocket engine.
Yes, it is.
And don't. I mean, I don't. I want to ask this very flippantly, but and I think I know part of the answer. But why can't you just do that? Why do you need an engine? Why can't you just do what we did, but bigger?
I of course love the why can't you just questions. Those are the best.
Well, okay. So
both in science, engineering, and in relationships, especially.
And in like baking, right? Because we do know that if you can't just make a gigantic pot of brownies, right? I mean, you can't,
as much as we would all like to.
We would like it doesn't always scale. Okay, so that's the first thing, right? But then there's other things that are going on with a big rocket.
Yes, and especially with engineering, scaling is a thing, and so that little solid propellant rocket engine that we would use on our model rockets, which was wonderful, and they would burn for only a few seconds, but the impulse was so high, and the thing that it was trying to lift was so light that it just shot those babies into the sky.
Well, I'm just wondering,
would go several hundred feet in the air, and then the parachute would come out, and they would drift back down to Earth, and we'd do it again because it was so much fun.
Because we were doing it again before SpaceX. All right, but
yes,
looking back on this, I remember the first time I saw one. I saw model rockets. Okay, if you've ever seen or heard them, typically on a summer evening when the wind has died down and it's a beautiful night, and you're in a place in a time zone where the sun stays up really long, right? Yeah. You'll hear them,
yes.
And then they're gone. And I'm just wondering about that acceleration there, that ratio of force to the mass there. All right, and those guys were just, I mean, they were
accelerating quite rapidly.
Do we know? Have you ever done that? Have you ever done that math afterwards to see they were going through? Okay.
Not really. That's a long time ago. We were just having fun launching rockets.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Well,
all right.
Okay, so
back to the big rocket.
Okay, we want to build a big rocket. We've got to build a big rocket. We're using shuttle parts for the wonderfully named SLS. And people love it and they hate it because it's reused other things, but that may or may not be the best thing. Yep. But it's what we got.
It's what we got, and so that's a way to look at it. Is this is what we got? This is what NASA is doing. And NASA has brought along the European Space Agency along for the ride. They've European Space Agency contributed the service module for the Orion. So the service module has all the propulsive elements and the power generation. So
it's from Europe, so it's in metric.
I don't know how all that works. I hope they work that out. I hope they work that out. And they have a common set of units that they're working with, and all is good. But so far, the Artemis 1 flight seems to be going well. The biggest test objective of this mission is to make sure that the heat shield and the reentry work from lunar orbit speeds. So that's still to come, but hopefully it all works out well, and by December 11th we'll know that that's done well.
So you said at lunar orbit speed. So they're coming in at a higher velocity than they used to in the Apollo days, or?
No, it's similar to the Apollo, but this is a new design of a spacecraft. It hasn't been tested at a lunar reentry speed yet.
But we've
So
tested it at other speeds?
there was a flight, yes, in 2014. The first flight, it was a test flight that put basically a boilerplate version of the Orion into a high Earth orbit, and then brought it back down for a reentry. So it did reenter and land, parachutes, the whole thing. Um, what's left to be done is a reentry test from lunar orbit, and that's one of the constraints for putting crew on board. They need to know that works. Now they expect it to work, obviously, but we do test flights so that we can actually convince ourselves that the design performs the way we intended.
So we need to. So our experiment of n of 1 is we will deem sufficient because we
That's
believe,
a whole nother conversation,
well,
which we don't
believe
have
we know
time to
enough.
get into.
Well, from
Yes.
like a stats point of view, we believe we know a lot about what's going on there. Okay, this is not, this is not like,
It's not the first time we've ever done
right,
this.
right, and we generally understand these principles now, but we
Yes.
need to make sure it applies to this particular case in the
Yes.
way we think. All right.
Yes,
Okay.
and the fact that we're only doing one test is interesting. I'm going to leave it at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's Artemis 1. It's going to come back down on December 11th, give or take.
Yep. And the SLS is performed admirably from everything I've seen and read. It did really well, despite going through, having to shelter in the vehicle assembly building for one hurricane, and then being out in the open for a second hurricane, and being stacked, having the solid rocket booster stacked for longer than they had originally intended. All of these things, it still performed flawlessly. It beat up the launch pad and the launch tower pretty well, because this is at this time it is currently the most powerful rocket in the world and the highest thrust, and it literally kicked the doors off of the elevator on the launch tower. The blast doors, it literally kicked the blast doors off the elevators.
Wow.
So they had blast doors,
and it kicked them in.
and it blew them off.
Okay, so we're talking 7.5 million pounds of thrust. I remember you said this.
That was
Apollo. 7.5 million.
Apollo. Yes.
So where are we with
I think it's
with the wonderfully named SLS?
8 point something, 8.8 maybe. I don't remember exactly, but it blew
at least
10%
more. Yeah. Okay.
It blew the doors off the elevators.
Wow.
So that was tough, because in order to open up the pad again, they had to walk down the entire tower, and they couldn't use the elevator. So they had to walk the stairs all the way to the top of the tower to do work and make sure everything was safe. So
they have to walk the tower to make sure it's safe to go up the tower. Yeah. Okay.
Well, because the elevator didn't work, because it blew the doors off.
Well, they always say when the elevator's not working, take the stairs.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
In event of a fire, take the stairs.
Yep. In the event of a big rocket launch, you have to take
the stairs. All right.
So
all right. So that's Artemis 1. Artemis 2 is coming. We're going to put people. We're going to pretty much do the same thing, but we'll put astronauts inside.
Yep, in the Orion spacecraft and fly them to the moon. It'll be the first time that humans have left Earth orbit since the Apollo 17 mission in December. I want to say December of 1972, which was almost 50 years ago, almost to the day. So
okay, all right, and
so that's not. But that's SLS is not the only big rocket.
There's another big rocket.
There's another big rocket being developed.
Okay, tell me this one has a better name.
That depends.
It's not Rocket McRocky. Rocket
It's
Face.
Close. It's close. It's Starship Super Heavy. So Starship is the name of the upper stage, and Super Heavy is the name of the booster stage. It's being developed by SpaceX, and it is a big rocket. It's bigger than the Saturn V. It's bigger than the SLS. It has some very interesting features to it, but the biggest feature is it is intended to be fully reusable. So unlike the SLS, where all of it gets thrown away, the the Starship Super Heavy is intended to be fully reusable.
Okay, so I'm going to ask two questions now. So the first one is a little bit wordier. Okay, so we launched this SLS. It threw Orion at the moon. Is it in orbit? Is the parts in orbit, or have they crash back down, or what?
It all comes back down.
It all comes back, and rapidly, not like
Well,
years
I
later.
take that back. The upper stage on Artemis 1 is going into, I believe it was going into a solar orbit, because it pushed the Orion spacecraft towards the moon, which meant that it was also going out away from Earth, and I believe it was going into a solar orbit.
Dude, okay.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, I'm thinking about a triple point between 3 gravity wells. All right, and one of them's a lot steeper.
Yep, exactly.
But okay, all right. So that's okay. That's the first question. The second question is, like, in the pounds of thrust game here, we had Apollo in third place, Apollo or Saturn V at 7.5 million, and then we have the SLS at 8 point something.
Yep.
How is Super Duper Starship Starship going?
Boy, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but among other things, it has 32. I believe it's going to have 32 engines at the bottom of it. They're called the Raptors, so it's going to have 32 Raptor engines, and at the bottom of this thing, which that has, I one time when I was working at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, I had the opportunity to go in the aft end of one of the space shuttle vehicles while it was in the orbiter processing facility being processed for its next flight. And that, with just 3 engines in the boat tail of the shuttle orbiter, was a plumbing nightmare. Pipes going in all different directions, all different sizes, pneumatics, the fuel, the fuel in the oxidizer, big pipes there that's branched off into 3, one for each engine. And those things had to be flexible so they could gimbal, and point the space, point the rocket in the right direction. I cannot imagine what it looks like in the tail end of the Super Heavy booster stage. It just, with 32 engines, big engines, it's just got. I've seen some pictures. It is, yeah. I just can't imagine doing that.
You keep telling me these things, and okay, did I read that the SLS, one of its engines didn't fire quite like it was supposed to, or did it work? You said flawlessly.
I have not heard anything about SLS like that.
Okay, well that's good. Okay, maybe I read something about one of the Starship Super Heavy test flights. One of the, you get 32 of them. Are they all working? Okay, then the next thing. So when they gimbal, well, that kind of means that that engine looks like a big.
Not all of them gimbal.
Okay, but when they do gimbal, the ones that do gimbal, I mean, I can't imagine that guy's with his feet on the pedals, pulling a cable.
That's all computers and software, man.
But what is strong enough to push that thing out of alignment to steer the rocket? I mean, what is it? Hydraulics?
Hydraulics or electric motors?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, traditionally it's been hydraulics, but there's electric motors are pretty darn good these days.
Yeah. So. Is it special hydraulic, like space hydraulic fluid? Do like what do they?
I am a rocket scientist, but not a propulsion engineer.
See, a rocket scientist would know those differences. All right.
So the Starship Super Heavy is intended to be completely reusable, which will be a very impressive feat. So what's interesting about it is, for those of us who were around at the end of the Apollo program, when we were starting, when NASA was starting to look at doing a space shuttle, the early proposals for the space shuttle had, quote, flyback boosters and basically an inline shuttle. So it was a 2-stage. Several of the proposals, as I recall, had a big first stage that was going to have crew on it to fly it back to land. And then, a second stage that was the part that went into orbit.
So did you call it stacked? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, stacked, one on top of the other, as opposed to the way the shuttle ended up being, which was the shuttle orbiter, the part that went into orbit was on the side of the rest of the rocket. And that had its downsides, which were made obvious in the Challenger accident. But what's so interesting to me about the Starship Super Heavy is it looks like some of those old original ideas, proposals for the NASA space shuttle, the first round, that it's basically a 2-stage rocket. The bottom stage is going to push the upper stage up into the air and get it moving, and then it's going to come back down and land. And not just land on legs. Oh no, that's not good enough. That's good. That's only good for, the Falcon rocket, that little Falcon rocket. For this big giant rocket, they're going to bring it back to the launch pad. And
it's going to return to the place.
It's going to return to the launch pad and
okay, go.
No, and it has the launch tower has arms.
And it grabs it and hugs it.
That have been adorably nicknamed Mechazilla. So the launch tower is nicknamed Mechazilla. And this thing has arms that are going to reach out and catch the rocket stage as it comes down.
Will it catch it or just hold it once it hits so it doesn't tip over?
It's gonna catch it
and
in
lower
the
it,
sense that, and then lower it. And not only that, yes, and they're already using Mechazilla as the crane to lift both the lower stage and the upper stage when they stack them. It's also the crane that puts the rocket together, and it's going to be what catches the booster stage.
Okay, so I'm looking at
the super heavy booster stage.
Okay, I don't want to. People work really hard at this stuff. Okay, and this is really hard engineering, and it is remarkable science and computering and all sorts of things.
Yes, it is.
But on one hand, I have a rocket that launches off of this launch pad. It goes up, it delivers what it needs to do, it comes back down, and pretty much puts itself back so it's ready to go again. Okay, it's like a Roomba that goes out and plugs itself back in every night. Okay,
yes.
It's kind of right.
Yeah.
Okay, and on the other hand, we have this other group that has a launch tower that can't even withstand the fire that the rocket makes on launch. Now, I understand that they are in different places of development. They're doing different things, but one of them is like those guys that the SpaceX guys have just got to be. I mean, are these guys all working together? Is there some animosity? How are they feeling?
That's
about
actually
this?
an interesting question because there is some overlap here between what NASA's doing with Artemis and SLS and what SpaceX is doing, and it's interesting. But I before I get into that, I will say you are absolutely right, and you've kind of tapped into why there's a love-hate relationship going on with SLS, for example, and it's because if SpaceX wasn't doing what they're doing, we'd all be happy that we had SLS.
Right.
But looking at what SpaceX is doing, a lot of us fans of spaceflight are like, that's the future. That's amazing. But here's where they intersect, and it's really interesting. And I am impressed with NASA that they're doing this. So NASA needs a lunar lander for the Artemis missions, the Artemis 3. So they issued a request for, proposals. It's a government contracting.
So wait. So this would be a thing that goes up with the what is the Orion? It detaches and goes down. It takes the guys down to the moon.
This would be that takes the crew. Well, that's your Apollo generation talking.
That's right.
Okay, this is not your Apollo generation anymore. So this is not your father's moon landing, or in case my this is
not
my
your moon
generation's
landing,
moon
Bob.
landing. Yeah, I'm the father at this point. So no, literally, so NASA said, hey, we got this cool Orion spacecraft. It's going to orbit the moon. It can't land on the moon, but we want to land on the moon, so we need a lunar lander. Please make a proposal and send it here by this date, and we will decide, which one we want. And so they had 3 proposals. One that was a pretty ordinary, conventional, ordinary is not the right word, conventional lunar lander. It had 4 legs. It had a descent stage and an ascent stage, and a place for crew to sit up at the top of that. That was a collaboration between Blue Origin and who's also working on a rocket, but hasn't flown in orbit yet. They've flown suborbital flights. The Blue Origin and traditional space contractors. The second one was a little less conventional, but still relatively small spacecraft that could launch on reasonably sized rockets. Instead of being sort of a vertical lander like the lunar module, it's a horizontal lander. So more like your Space 1999 kind of thing, or the moon bus from the movie 2001. Okay. That's it's long and low rather than tall.
All right.
And so that was another one. And then there was this proposal by SpaceX. And the proposal by SpaceX was to take a version of the Starship spacecraft, the upper stage of the Starship Super Heavy Big Rocket, and convert it to be a lunar lander, put legs on the back end of it, and solar cells on it, get rid of the heat shield tiles because it never has to go back into the Earth's atmosphere. It's just got to go out into space and then land on the moon and then take off from the moon. And amazingly enough, and I was as surprised as anybody, NASA chose the SpaceX proposal. So
really?
Here we now have the NASA hitching a ride to the moon
on their competitor.
On not really competitor, but the other big rocket. Right. So both of these vehicles need to work in order for this Artemis plan to land on the moon to be successful. And not only that, the one of the features of the Starship Super Heavy, in addition to being reusable, it is refillable. Okay, so there's planned to be a tanker version that will just bring up fuel and oxidizer to an already in orbit Starship, fill it up, and have to do multiple launches in order to fill it up completely, and then, for example, send it to the moon. So NASA has
so it doesn't have to come back down. It doesn't have to go through the gravity, the landing on Earth kind of thing, going through the air. It doesn't have to do any of that stuff.
The tankers do, but the lunar lander doesn't.
Right, the lander doesn't. Right.
Yeah, wow. And so this is part of the plan of record for NASA going back to the moon.
Wow.
Yes, it's amazing. It really is.
And so, okay, so Artemis, Bob, I have to wrap up time.
I know we're out of time.
Okay, so Artemis 1 is in motion as we speak. Artemis 2 is going sometime in 23. Do we know, early, late? I
think it may be 24 now. It
24,
it depends. Okay. They haven't decided on the date yet. There were things they needed to know from this flight that in order to start the planning. They did talk about that in the latest press briefing, that they will be coming up with the date not long after they've done the analysis of the data they collect from this flight. So they need Artemis 1 back to the ground successful, and then do the data analysis, and then they'll set a date for Artemis 2. But
and then Artemis 3 will follow. Artemis 3 will follow.
Artemis 3 will follow, and there will be quite a development path for that, because the lunar lander will need to be tested in an uncrewed flight before they commit crew to landing with it.
That'd be like Artemis 2.5, or they think they're called something else. Like
I don't know what they'll call it, but yeah, there will be a moon landing with the Starship lander version before they put crew on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's
ahead.
things to these things. It looks like things are happening now. This feels a lot more real than just speculating about what might be the thing.
It's not a slide presentation anymore. This is really happening.
All right. Well, this is phenomenal, Bob. As always, I would love to say I have no words, but then I wouldn't be talking.
And you're never at a loss for words.
Indebted. I'm so happy that you were able to join us today, and it's been great having you.
And as always, I thoroughly enjoy coming and talk about rockets or time or whatever else we like to talk about. I will be happy to come back as these things progress and let your listeners know how it's going.
This is phenomenal. Thank you very much. And to all our listeners, thank you for being there. Remember to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good, and enjoy the adventure of life.